Enlightenment is not something we find by going beyond our thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions. It is what we are prior to our thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions. It cannot be approached. It cannot be found. It can only be recognized. What I essentially am is not beyond experience. It is prior to experience. And of course also remains present during the midst of all experience, irrespective of its content. Enlightenment or awakening is just an exotic term that signifies the knowing of our own being as it is, its knowing of itself, before it is colored or qualified by any particular experience. Everybody knows their own being, and it is this knowing of our own being that enables everyone to say for absolute certain, I am. But for most people, our own being, that which I am, is mixed up with, and therefore seemingly limited by, the qualities of experience. So for most people, instead of knowing I am simply as I am, we believe and feel I am a person, I am a man, I am a woman, I have a certain age, I am sad, I am lonely, I am a mother, I am a father, I am a husband, I am a wife, I am a friend, I am sitting on a chair, etc., etc., etc. In all these statements, what I am is obviously present, but it is mixed with thoughts, feelings, images, activities, relationships, and therefore it is not discerned clearly. Our own being ceases to know itself as it is. It knows itself in a limited version, mixed with the qualities of experience. All that is necessary is for our own being, ourself, to know itself as it essentially is, before it is apparently mixed with, and as a result seemingly limited by, experience. This recognition is not an extraordinary experience. There could not be anything less exotic or less extraordinary than simply recognizing our own being. Even the taste of tea is exotic compared to the knowing of our own being. And nothing could be more intimate than the knowing of our own being. Even our most precious thoughts and feelings are strangers to us compared to the intimacy of our own self. So our own being is open, empty, imperturbable, luminous. What I am is present in the midst, not just in the background of, but in the midst of all experience. All that is necessary is to focus on the I am aspect of all experience. instead of focusing on the depression, the loneliness, the agitation, whatever, just emphasize the I am in all experience. That will bring our essential being out of the background of experience into the foreground. And the loneliness or the sadness or whatever will gradually recede into the background. We may not ever have an experience to which we can point to as an enlightenment experience. We may never have the thought or feeling, I am enlightened. I have never once had the thought or feeling, I am enlightened. Other people may say such things about me, but I know nothing of such things. However, we may gradually feel the innate peace of our own being begins to emerge from obscurity in the background of experience. It creeps up, as it were, from behind us, first making its presence felt in the background of experience, then beginning to permeate and saturate experience itself, and in time outshining experience. If you take anything away, take the peace, the innate peace of your own being. All our words are meant only to magnify that in our experience.
The first day, I found myself in sort of abiding in a kind of an emptiness, and it was, and all of a sudden, just of its own accord, a thought came, and it immediately defaulted back to awareness. And then another thought came. It could be Rupert's there, and defaulted back. I call it default because that's what it felt like. And a series of thoughts happened like this, and it suddenly seemed to indicate in some kind of way that this is how I create the world. That these thoughts that come, except that each time, without me doing anything, it reverted back into resting in awareness. And it was sort of like, is this what's really happening? That as thoughts arise, it is creating the world that I believe to be there. But in this case, instead of going along with the narrative that normally attaches to each thought, it just reverted back into being with awareness. And so that thing that you said at the very end about, the world is there through thought or because we think it, whatever it was you said, I found it, I was surprised by that, but it also seemed like there was something accurate about it. And I just wondered what comment you might have about that. How thoughts literally create, when they have a narrative story connected to it, the world that we believe to be there.
I didn't mean that thought literally creates all of this. What I meant was that thought abstracts from reality an apparently independently existing world made out of stuff called matter. In other words, I'm not suggesting that all of this that is being perceived is created by thought. All of this Let's call it reality, because there is something real. There is something undoubtedly real about what we are experiencing. Nobody can deny that. We may not be experiencing a world. We can't be sure that this is a world. It could, after all, be a dream. Mm-hmm. But whatever it is, even if it's a dream, it is a real experience. And that's what's meant by reality. This experience is undoubtedly, whatever it is real. Thought abstracts from this reality an imaginary object, a separate, independently existing object or world made out of stuff called matter. That world is never found. That stuff called matter is never found. That object is never found. All that is found is this reality, whatever this reality is. It's thought that abstracts from reality an apparently independently and objectively existing world.
So what part then would you say narrative plays in that creation?
Well, the narrative is the thought, the thought that says, this is a world. How do you know this is a world? Does the world rise up to say, I am a world? Does a tree know that it is a tree? Does a cow know that it is a cow? Does the world know that it is a world? No. Who says that it is a world? How do you know that this is a world? It is just a perception arising in consciousness. It is thought that says it is a world made out of something outside consciousness called matter. So it is thought that doesn't really create the world. It is thought that imagines that reality is an objective world. Thought doesn't create the reality. The reality is all there is. It is self-sustaining, self-creating.
Yes, but thought is what gives the names to things. For example,
well, thought doesn't give names to things because there are no things before they are named. It is the naming of reality that creates apparent things in reality. It is thought that abstracts things, objects, discrete entities from the indivisible and infinite totality, which cannot be named. It has no name and it has no form. Thought gives it its name, perception gives it its form.
Yeah, exactly.
And therefore thought thought and perception create a world out of reality.
For me, I was experiencing this, well, obviously I'm experiencing it from this particular point of view. So the question really came from, I think it was from the involuntary way this occurred, that a process happened where resting in awareness, thought comes up before it could even really take hold and me go with that thought. It just reverted back to being an awareness. And so I think the question, maybe there's another aspect to it, which is, when we were infants, we didn't have those thoughts. We just experienced what we experienced.
Yes,
then we had thoughts with, and
yes,
we did call that
an infant
flower.
has no idea that it is a body in a world.
Right.
The infant still experiences, or there is still experiencing. But the infant hasn't yet conceptualized its experience or abstracted a self that knows or a world that is known. It's not thoughts themselves that are problematic. It is the belief that our thoughts are absolutely true that is a problem. There's nothing wrong with having the thought, this is a flower. It's necessary for human existence,
Right.
and it's so it's not that thoughts are not a problem that we are saddled with. That they are a necessary, and more than necessary, they are a creative tool. But to believe that what thought says about reality is absolutely true, That is a problem.
So that's the narrative that I'm
To believe that this here is a flower, that this is an object, that this is a self, that this is a world, to believe that that is a true description of reality is a problem. In other words, to believe that reality consists of a multiplicity and diversity of objects known by an independently existing self, that is a problem. It's the cause of suffering. It's not the thoughts themselves. It's necessary to have thoughts, to speak about tables and chairs and people and glasses. It's necessary for human beings. That's not a problem. It is the belief that the content of thought is absolutely true. That's the problem. In other words, concepts are not a problem. Beliefs are a problem.
So isn't the story, the narrative, the commentary that goes along with the response to what we see?
It's not the story that is the problem. It's the belief that the story is real.
Yes, okay, fine.
Yeah. When you watch a movie, you're watching a story. It's not a problem because you don't believe it is real.
Right.
It's not so in other words, the movie is not a problem for you.
Right.
If you were to believe it was real, then it would be a problem. It's beliefs, concepts are not a problem. They are necessary. Beliefs are problematic. We are saddled with concepts, but we are not saddled with beliefs. In other words, concepts are necessary for human beings. Beliefs are not necessary. They are optional. It's quite easy to lead a fully functional human life, a sane, intelligent, loving, functional human life without any beliefs, but with concepts.
Thinking is intertwined with a storyline that goes with the thinking. That's my experience.
It's true that a lot of thinking stems from the belief and feeling of being a temporary finite self. So there are all different kinds of thinking. There is functional thinking. We need to go shopping for dinner tonight. That is not an egoic thought. It is just a thought that arises on behalf of the preservation of the body. The thought, I need to book my flight back to England, is not an egoic thought. It's just a functional thought. There are investigative thoughts, such as the thoughts that you and I are now engaging in. These are thoughts that are investigating the nature of reality. They are not egoic thoughts.
Right.
There are celebratory thoughts. And then there are egoic thoughts. Just one small, or not so small, but one small part of our thoughts which are based, that arise from the feeling, I am a temporary finite self. He did this to me, or she did that to me, and it hurt me, and therefore it was wrong of them to do it. That would be a thought that arises on behalf of a separate self. Those are the only thoughts that are problematic. And they naturally begin to wind down, not through effort or discipline, but just through negligence. They just become redundant in proportion to the extent that we are established in our true nature. These thoughts just begin to arise less and less. The thoughts and the accompanying activities and relationships begin to arise less and less.
So what's your understanding of this process that seemed to happen with thought coming and then all of a sudden, sort of being cut away by a process that I was not actively engaged in? It didn't seem.
Well, a thought arises, and depending on the content of the thought, it is. Some thoughts require development. For instance, I must book my flight home. Okay, I better Google British Airways. I better look up my membership number. I better, what's the date I've got to go? What time does the retreat finish? What time shall I go? How will I get home at the other end? So the thought I need to book my flight home may trigger a series of thoughts that they will require following. So I'm not going to have the first thought, I need to book my flight home, and then go back to abiding in awareness. No, I need to have the second thought, and the third thought, and the fourth thought. Otherwise, I'll never get home. So, but there are other thoughts, there are other thoughts that don't require following. For instance, she shouldn't have done that to me. She shouldn't have said that.
Right.
Now, we all know what it's like to follow that thought, to have the next thought, and then to take action on that thought, and then suffer the consequences of that action, and then to have another reaction. We all know.
Yeah, right.
So when that thought arises, she shouldn't have said that to me. That is the thought that should take us straight back to our true nature. We don't follow it. We ask ourselves, who is the I on behalf of whose behalf that thought arises? That's the second thought. First thought, she shouldn't have said that to me. Second thought, on whose behalf does that thought arise? Third thought, it arises on behalf of I, myself. Who is that self? And that takes you all the way back to yourself. Now, in time, so those are four thoughts. In time, you don't actually have to go through the thinking process. The thought arises, she shouldn't have said that to me. And there is this, you just go straight back to your true nature. And the thought it peters out. It doesn't have any consequences. It's not developed in thoughts. It doesn't turn into a feeling. The feeling doesn't turn into an action or a relationship. It just peters out. And in time, because that thought ceases to be exercised, it begins to rise less and less. Mm-hmm. Someone says something to you, it doesn't produce any response.
So really, and this is something I've felt for many years, just to not really take things too personally.
It's not taking things too personally, because if you don't take something personally, it means there is still a person there, albeit a person that is not taking offense any longer. The question is there a person there in the first place, either to take offense or not?
Right.
Then the issue of taking things personally doesn't arise.
Doesn't arise. Wow, that's great. Yeah, I really see that. I'll have to ditch that, because I really, it's just an automatic thing.
This is a good example of something I said this morning about not turning a description into a prescription. Mm-hmm. The description is a statement of fact. There is no personal self. That's just a statement of fact. It doesn't imply any shoulds or shouldn'ts, do's or don't. It doesn't imply any practice. It's just, this is how things are. There is no personal self. The personal self then turns that description into a prescription to be practiced. I must practice not being personally reactive. And the personal self subtly reasserts itself and substantiates itself by practicing getting rid of itself. So that would be a good example of understanding. I think I said it in relation to allowing or accepting, not turning accepting into a practice that we as a person do. This subtly reinforces the separate self. In Advaita light, we could talk about not taking things personally. Mm-hmm. But here, we go deeper than that. There is no personal self, either to take things personally or not. The question doesn't arise.
That sort of perspective came about because I once got off an escalator in New York, Grand Central Station, and when I got off, I was kicked in the rear. And I turned around, and there was the person standing at the top of the escalator who had just kicked me. And I was starting to go, what should I do? And then I saw him kick the next person. And I said to myself, in the dualistic way, I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or I was in the right place at the right time. What a great teaching. Don't take things personally. Sometimes you show up and something happens. It could be an accident. It could be anything. And so it came from that experience, which has lived with me for a long time, but I see what you're saying about it's still from the perspective as if, as a person. That's really helpful.
All that is necessary is to focus on the I am aspect of all experience, instead of focusing on the depression, the loneliness, the agitation, whatever. Just emphasize the I am in all experience. That will bring our essential being out of the background of experience into the foreground. And the loneliness or the sadness or whatever will gradually recede into the background. We may not ever have an experience to which we can point to as an enlightenment experience. We may gradually feel the innate peace of our own being begins to emerge from obscurity in the background of experience. It creeps up, as it were, from behind us, first making its presence felt in the background of experience, then beginning to permeate and saturate experience itself, and in time outshining experience. If you take anything away, take the peace, the innate peace of your own being. All our words are meant only to magnify that in our experience.